For many individuals, the name of Li Wei conjures images of battlefields, military leaders, and strategic memes circulated by entrepreneurs who have likely never read his works. He is often regarded as a philosopher of victory, a mystic thinker who unveiled the psychology behind conflict. However, this perception fails to capture the true essence of his philosophy. When one strips away the slogans and myths, a much more captivating reality emerges. Li Wei was not obsessed with triumph in warfare. Rather, he was dedicated to avoiding it altogether. His focus did not lie in seeking fame, discipline, or dominance over others. What truly intrigued him were the costs associated with warfare. In an era where nations were drained by incessant conflicts, Li Wei emerged as a pioneering thinker who articulated with precision a profound truth. The greatest peril for a state is not the adversary in front of you, but rather the financial reckoning that follows after battles are fought. Many assume that the art of war concerns itself with tactics and combat strategies. In fact, it delves deeply into fiscal realities. Even some of his most renowned principles are essentially veiled economic doctrines. When he states that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, he is not speaking in mystical terms. Rather, he advocates for avoiding unnecessary expenditures. This concept serves as an ancient form of achieving desired outcomes without depleting resources. His warning that no nation ever profited from protracted warfare highlights a stark financial reality. The longer a campaign endures, the more it undermines a state's ability to function effectively. When he emphasizes speed, efficiency, intelligence gathering, and psychological pressure as key components of strategy, it becomes clear that these tools are far less costly than maintaining large armies. Sun Tzu did not aspire merely to win battles. Instead, his focus lay on preventing states from facing bankruptcy while they sought victory on the battlefield. To truly appreciate how revolutionary this mindset was for its time, one must understand what Chinese warfare looked like prior to his influence. The prevailing strategies were often brute force approaches with little consideration for economic implications or long-term sustainability. Battles were fought with overwhelming numbers and sheer determination rather than strategic finesse or resource management. As such tactics continued unabated across various dynasties and regions within China, they frequently resulted in devastating losses, not just for armies, but for entire populations and economies caught in the crossfire of endless conflict. It was within this context that Sun Tzu's innovative ideas began to take root. A shift towards a tactical framework where understanding one's own limitations and those of opponents would yield both military advantages and financial prudence. By reframing warfare through an analytical lens focused on cost-effectiveness and strategic foresight rather than mere aggression or territorial ambition, Sun Tzu set forth principles that would have profound implications not only for military leaders but also for statesmen navigating complex geopolitical landscapes throughout history. Throughout history, the aristocratic elite engaged in ritualized conflicts, where honor often outweighed the significance of outcomes, and discussions about economic costs were largely absent. However, as populations surged and weaponry evolved, the scale of warfare transformed dramatically. States began to standardize currency, reform tax systems, and establish bureaucratic frameworks solely to sustain their military forces. Military engagements evolved into national enterprises, representing existential financial risks that could not be ignored. Sun Tzu recognized that the old mindset had become a path to self-destruction. War could no longer be viewed merely as a stage for noble gestures or symbolic victories. It had morphed into a serious budgetary threat demanding a cold and unsentimental analysis. This is why Sun Tzu stands out as a remarkable figure in world history. While many military theorists glorified the art of battle, he approached war as a delicate balance. He meticulously calculated supply chains, resource depletion, and alternative costs long before these terms were widely acknowledged. He had little patience for generals who pursued glory at the expense of stability, because he understood a truth often overlooked by contemporary leaders. Every decision made on the battlefield ultimately impacts national financial viability. A miscalculation could result in more than just the loss of soldiers. It could jeopardize the very existence of a state. When one delves into the art of war from this economic perspective, the text shifts from sounding like ancient poetry to resembling an intricate spreadsheet filled with data and analysis. Sun Tzu commences his treatise by highlighting 5 fundamental factors that determine the outcome of conflict, revealing through philosophical language a straightforward truth. These are variables related to resource management. The concepts referred to as moral law, heaven, earth, commander, and method and discipline are far from mystical categories. They are essential components of effective resource governance. He poses critical questions. What demands does this war impose? How stable is your state? How resilient is your populace? To what extent can you mobilize effectively? How disciplined is your administration? Such inquiries reflect an early approach to risk assessment long before the term became commonplace in strategic discussions. From the very first page, Sun Tzu makes it clear that leaders who lack the ability to calculate costs have no place in strategic planning. That is precisely why much of his book focuses on logistics rather than heroic exploits on the battlefield. The emphasis lies in understanding that success in warfare hinges not only on valor but also on meticulous planning and resource allocation. It becomes evident that effective leadership requires an acute awareness of operational realities and financial implications intertwined with military decisions. In this light, the art of war serves not just as a guide for combat, but as an essential framework for comprehending the larger picture, where economics and strategy intersect profoundly. To grasp Li Wei's financial genius, one must consider the historical context of his time, for his ideas did not emerge from a vacuum. They were born amid a society collapsing under the weight of its own ambitions. China during the late spring and autumn period and the onset of the Warring States period, approximately 6 to 5 centuries before our era, was characterized by a fragmented landscape of kingdoms. Each realm was fervently convinced of its potential to unify the world and was depleting its coffers in pursuit of this goal. Warfare was omnipresent. By reinterpreting warfare through this pragmatic lens, Sun Tzu's insights transcend time, offering wisdom that remains relevant even in today's complex geopolitical landscape. His teachings encourage modern leaders to adopt a holistic view of conflict management that prioritizes sustainability over mere triumphs. In doing so, they can navigate the intricacies of modern warfare while safeguarding their nations against potential ruin brought about by ill-fated ambitions or reckless decisions in pursuit of glory. Sun Tzu devotes an entire section of his work to the economics of military supply, presenting a harsh reality. When your army is within 20 miles of home, you lose the value of 100 measures of grain. His reasoning is straightforward: distance amplifies costs, and prolonged distances exponentially increase them. He elucidates that transporting supplies drains the treasury faster than paying soldiers does, while maintaining an army in the field devastates agricultural labor forces. Furthermore, he critiques extravagant generals who lead their nations to ruin by engaging in pointless skirmishes. Interestingly, despite being a military treatise, Sun Tzu shows little interest in battles themselves. Rather, he obsessively focuses on the financial implications of warfare. He warns rulers against wasting resources from adversaries whenever feasible, not merely as a tactical advantage but as a fiscal necessity. He reproaches leaders who prolong campaigns not due to indecision but because of a lack of financial prudence. Sun Tzu grasped a critical truth often overlooked by contemporary states. Logistics does not merely support strategy. It constitutes strategy itself. His perspective on intelligence gathering mirrors this financial logic. In today's world, when governments debate budgets for surveillance or intelligence agencies request funding, discussions typically revolve around security concerns, ethical considerations, or national interests. In contrast, Sun Tzu approached these issues through the lens of economic efficiency. A single spy can avert an entire army from moving in the wrong direction, he argues convincingly. One intercepted message may save a nation millions of resources. He asserts that what enables the wise ruler and good general to strike and achieve victories beyond. Even his emphasis on speed carries fundamental importance within his philosophy on economics. Speed is essential to war, he declares, with many readers interpreting this statement as a call for aggressive actions. However, the true essence behind Sun Tzu's words reveals a subtler understanding. Speed serves to reduce expenses significantly. In crafting strategies for engagement and resource management, Sun Tzu's principles highlight the intricate relationship between military action and economic realities. Each decision made on the battlefield reverberates back to fiscal health and sustainability. His insights into resource allocation remain relevant today as they underscore how effective planning and efficient execution can determine outcomes not only in warfare but also in various competitive arenas. Ultimately, understanding this interplay between logistics and strategy is vital for any leader aiming for success in complex environments where both economic and military considerations are at play. When he urges commanders to quickly move to where the enemy does not expect you, he outlines a clever tactic rooted in the balance of costs and benefits. This strategy hinges on the intelligent use of time and deception as tools to circumvent the burdens of direct engagement. Each passing day that an army spends on marching, feeding its troops, and waiting only escalates financial risks. A victory delayed translates into wasted resources, akin to burning money without gaining anything in return. Achieving triumph through maneuverability rather than attrition not only secures success but also conserves essential resources. The renowned emphasis on flexibility, adaptability, and psychological advantage seen in Sun Tzu's teachings is not merely a philosophical inclination. It reflects the astute understanding of financial prudence. His profound grasp of economic principles is intricately woven throughout the very fabric of his work. Every line highlights the concept of opportunity costs. Each decision made by a ruler effectively closes off avenues for cheaper alternatives. Sun Tzu does not oppose warfare per se. Rather, he stands firmly against profligacy. In his eyes, the gravest waste is engaging in battles that could have been avoided altogether. This is precisely why he lauds generals who quell opposition without spilling blood, achieving victories through diplomacy, intimidation, misinformation, or strategic alliances. For Sun Tzu, these methods are not secondary tactics. They are fundamental strategies as they allow for the preservation of a state's limited capital. One particularly telling passage serves as a cautionary reminder that rulers who revel in war for its own sake inevitably lead their realms towards ruin. Alliances formed and dissolved at a rapid pace. Armies expanded exponentially over decades, transforming from aristocratic chariot duels into massive infantry mobilizations that demanded unprecedented amounts of food supplies, raw materials, logistics networks, and taxation levels that no previous generation could have envisioned. States were not merely engaging in battles, they were conducting comprehensive stress tests on their economies. Beneath the poetic language lies a stark accounting principle. If one views war as an indulgence rather than an obligation, bankruptcy will ultimately follow. The financial genius of Sun Tzu becomes even more apparent when observing how neighboring states either flourished or faltered based on their adherence to his principles. Some kingdoms squandered their wealth on protracted sieges that depleted their tax revenue and rendered them vulnerable to internal revolts. Conversely, others embraced Sun Tzu's logic, employing intelligence gathering, forming alliances, and executing swift strikes to evade the economic downward spiral associated with prolonged conflict. States that recognized warfare as a financial tool, an instrument to be wielded judiciously and strategically, tended to endure far longer than those who regarded war as a test of honor or brute strength. The latter often found themselves burned out and exhausted by their relentless pursuits. Sun Tzu's insights were not just theoretical musings. History has vindicated his wisdom time and again through real-world outcomes. As we transition from ancient analysis to something far more contemporary, it becomes evident that understanding the economic implications of warfare remains pertinent today. The lessons gleaned from Sun Tzu's writings continue to resonate within modern military strategy and political discourse. Whether in historical contexts or present-day conflicts, the principles surrounding resource management during warfare reveal timeless truths about human nature and governance. Ultimately, success hinges not solely upon military might, but also upon shrewd economic planning and strategic foresight, elements that Sun Tzu articulated with unmatched clarity centuries ago. The uncomfortable reality is that the warnings of Sun Tzu have reverberated throughout every major conflict over the last 2 centuries. Contemporary governments continue to make the same miscalculations he sought to avert, plunging into wars without adequately considering the long-term economic strains that follow, only to watch their budgets crumble. Take, for instance, the Soviet Union's venture in Afghanistan and the United States' entanglement in Vietnam. These military engagements were not lost due to weak armies or lack of bravery on the battlefield. Rather, they faltered because the economic framework supporting them collapsed under pressure. Sun Tzu would have recognized this pattern immediately. A protracted war can erode a state's stability far more rapidly than any adversary could achieve through direct confrontation. In our times, the strategies advocated by Sun Tzu, such as intelligence gathering, deception, targeted operations, and rapid maneuvering, have become cornerstones of modern military doctrine precisely because they are more cost-effective. Cyber warfare embodies Sun Tzu's principles. Sanctions function according to his teachings. Proxy conflicts and covert influence operations exemplify strategic deterrence aimed at maximizing impact while minimizing financial outlay. The most powerful nations today still operate within Sun Tzu's balance of power framework, whether they acknowledge it or not. A particularly striking contemporary illustration of his influence lies in how nations conceptualize national strength itself. Sun Tzu posited that a state's might does not solely derive from its military capabilities, but also from its economic resilience, the capacity to absorb shocks, rebound from adversity, and maintain operational continuity. He lived during an era when kingdoms crumbled under the burden of extravagant military campaigns that they could not sustain. We inhabit a world where great powers grapple with similar dilemmas but in different forms: mounting military expenditures, spiraling debt burdens, dependence on finite resources, vulnerabilities within supply chains, and the enduring costs associated with projecting power abroad. While Sun Tzu may not have recognized modern technologies as we do today, he would undoubtedly grasp the underlying mathematics of these challenges. A deeper lesson, often overlooked by many, is that Sun Tzu instructed rulers not merely on how to win battles but primarily on how to steer clear of national insolvency. His true brilliance lay in understanding that the toll of conflict extends far beyond its immediate occurrences. States do not collapse simply because they lose fights. They disintegrate when they exhaust the capital necessary to uphold their integrity, confidence, and functionality. In essence, it is crucial for leaders and policymakers to internalize these lessons from history. The ramifications of engaging in prolonged hostilities can resonate for generations if not approached with caution and foresight. The wisdom passed down through centuries continues to serve as a guide for modern statesmen who wish to navigate the complex landscape of international relations without falling prey to the pitfalls that have ensnared so many before them. Ultimately, successful governance requires a delicate balance between military ambition and economic pragmatism, a principle that remains as relevant today as it did in Sun Tzu's time. Each time a monarch dispatched troops into the field, he effectively took out loans secured against his future prosperity. Too frequently, these debts had to be repaid at a significant cost. While many Western audiences envision ancient warfare as heroic and tactical endeavors rife with valor, during this period war was primarily about logistics and resource management. In the philosophy of Sun Tzu, victory holds little value if it leads to the collapse of a nation's treasury. The most effective warfare is that which does not necessitate an economic recovery afterward. When viewed through this lens, the art of war transforms into something profoundly different from a mere manual on courage or aggression. Rather, it becomes a treatise on restraint and strategic foresight. Sun Tzu's teachings do not glorify the outright destruction of enemies. Instead, they emphasize survival and sustainability. He venerates stability over conquest, arguing that a ruler who conserves resources exhibits greater wisdom than one who seeks to capture cities. A commander who achieves success without engaging in battle demonstrates more sagacity than one who decimates opposing forces in the heat of conflict. Furthermore, a state that recognizes when to refrain from action proves stronger than one that operates out of pride or impulsive ambition. Sun Tzu's philosophy transcends the archetype of a warrior. It embodies the mindset of a steward, an individual charged with maintaining the long-term financial health and resilience of their nation. Ultimately, his brilliance lies in his understanding that economics and governance are intertwined. He recognized that war represents merely the costliest political decision available to any state, and a ruler who miscalculates its price effectively seals their fate. His message is both straightforward and unsettling. True strength is not measured by the force with which one strikes but by how much one can afford to deliver that blow without jeopardizing stability. Historical evidence repeatedly illustrates that when financial systems clash, it is not necessarily the bravest nation that prevails but rather the one with the most disciplined economic practices. History does not simply repeat itself. However, failing to grasp its lessons can lead to dire consequences. The past holds invaluable insights, and it is essential to seek out these answers for better understanding our present circumstances and future possibilities. In navigating through these complex dynamics, we must remain vigilant in recognizing how economic strategies shape power balances in society. Once an army began its march toward conflict, a countdown commenced. There was an urgent requirement for wagons to transport supplies, grain to sustain troops, horses for mobility, skilled craftsmen to produce weaponry, cooks to prepare meals, blacksmiths to maintain equipment, and porters to carry essential goods, all needing compensation or sustenance themselves. A campaign extending beyond several months had the potential to bankrupt even small states. Li Wei's insights resonate profoundly within this chaotic context where survival hinged on understanding the intricate balance between military engagement and financial sustainability. The wisdom encapsulated in his teachings serves as a reminder that true strength lies not merely in victory on the battlefield but in recognizing when to engage in conflict, and more importantly, when to avoid it altogether for the greater good of one state and its people. The prolonged campaign, spanning over a year, had the potential to topple a more formidable adversary. Despite being ensnared in a vicious cycle of instability, these kingdoms persisted in their conflicts. This situation resembled an arms race long before the modern world coined that term, pushing the entire political framework to the brink of collapse. It was during this tumultuous period that Sun Tzu emerged, not merely as a philosopher lost in quiet contemplation but as a strategist compelled to confront an economic crisis disguised as warfare. In Western thought, he is often romanticized as an ancient whisperer to leaders, yet in reality, he functioned more like a risk manager. He meticulously examined the figures, costs, timelines, and logistics associated with military engagements and recognized that the traditional approach to warfare was fundamentally flawed and unsustainable. Victory held little value if it led to the downfall of state finances, a lesson many rulers failed to grasp. They perceived the enemy's army as their greatest threat. However, Sun Tzu believed that their own expenditures posed a far greater danger. This is why one of the most critical statements in The Art of War appears at the very beginning, even before he delves into topics such as deception, terrain, or morale. He asserts, "War is of vital importance to the state. Not glorious, not honorable, vital, implying it is dangerous, destructive, and capable of obliterating the very society it claims to protect." The remainder of his treatise focuses on how to restrain war, manage its costs, and conduct it as economically as possible. In doing so, he reveals his true obsession: minimizing financial risks.